Well, it's that time again. We're a third of the way through one of the new Marvel Cinematic Universe shows on Disney+, and nothing will be the same. So far, Wanda Maximoff has discovered she's the Scarlet Witch, and that comes with some reality-warping powers. Sam Wilson passed on and then accepted the role of Captain America after learning some of the troubled history of the Super Soldier Serum. And now, the Loki that went missing during the time heist has run into not only a mysterious bureaucracy that regulates time, but a version of himself that has decided to kick that anthill over. The people we've been introduced to and the actions they've taken so far have given us a hint as to what their role might be for the future of the MCU at large, and for Doctor Strange and Spider-Man specifically. The Time Variance Authority itself has a long history in the comics, mostly as a foil for the mighty Thor, who first ran across them in their beta test form, the Time Twisters. Created by the one who was left behind, they're supposed to monitor time, but like any bureaucracy, the bureaucracy becomes more important than the thing it was created for and is easily corrupted. The biggest clue we have to that being the case in the MCU's TVA is in the form of Judge Ravonna, who supervises Mobius and the rest of the time agents and analysts. Ravonna has a bit of a history with the TVA and with variants in the comics thanks mostly to her long and complicated relationship with the time-skipping warlord Kang the Conqueror. Thanks to Kang's time-skipping nature, there are two Ravonnas. When Kang proposed to Ravonna, she said yes. She also said no. No went back in time to 1903, where she said yes to a different Kang, because time travel is complicated, this one calling himself Victor Timely, because subtlety is for losers. The one who said yes ruled alongside Kang as Revelation, eventually taking over for Kang, fighting who else? The Time Variance Authority, among others. Loki's Ravonna is a judge for the TVA with access to the Timekeepers. During a little one-on-one with Mobius about rogue Lokis, Mobius hints that he's not the only analyst that Ravonna has her little one-on-ones with, and even that one of the Timekeepers looks familiar. We know that Jonathan Majors has been cast as Kang the Conqueror in the upcoming Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but we've also learned that there can be multiple variations of characters, especially now that Lady Loki has thrown a toolbox worth of wrenches in the timeline. All of this is adding up to indicate that something doesn't quite add up at the Time Variance Authority. It just might be that the sacred timeline isn't really about order, but rather that another master manipulator has gained access to their power to serve their own conquering ambitions. And thanks to the funky nature of time travel, it's both just happened and already happened. Hold on, I'll explain. Once upon a time, things were kind of simple down MCU way. Tony Stark decided to go the hero route and create an Iron Man suit. Bruce Banner got pressured into trying to recreate the Super Soldier Serum and overshot the mark by like a bunch. The original Super Soldier was brought out of the ice. Finally, a sibling rivalry in Asgard spilled over into Midgard, better known as Earth to the people on it, which was later used as a way for Thanos to up his Infinity Stone collection. But then things get weird both on the screen and behind the scenes. The guy Loki killed that united the Avengers didn't stay dead as is the tradition in comics, but his further adventures happened on ABC, not the big screen. To make things more complicated, the things that happened on TV were not under the auspices of MCU guru Kevin Feige, but instead Jeff Loeb, with Loeb and Feige reporting to Marvel CEO Isaac Perlmutter. The result was that the show and the movie started interacting less and less. Coulson's team located Loki's scepter and sourced a spare helicarrier for Nick Fury to save the day in Age of Ultron. But by the time Infinity War rolls around, the invasion of Thanos just gets a passing mention. More importantly, the movie's only ever obliquely referred to the series. Things get even more complicated when some of Marvel's street-level heroes got a turn at their own series in the Netflix Defender series that was based in the aftermath of the Battle of New York, but otherwise it never really interacted with the wider MCU. Even further removed, young heroes The Runaways and Cloak and Dagger interacted with each other, but only name-dropped the larger MCU. It has been no secret that there wasn't a great deal of cooperation between Marvel Studios and Marvel Entertainment, and in 2015 the whole thing was reorganized so that Feige was in charge of the whole thing, which left the question of exactly what part of what happened at Marvel Entertainment was considered part of the universe. Probably not any of the Inhumans. To make things even more complicated, Disney bought Fox, bringing the Mutants and Fantastic Four back to Marvel, on top of Marvel and Sony entering into a complicated sharing relationship with Spider-Man. This leaves the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a bit of an identity problem that just so happened to start after the first Avengers movie, right about the time that this Loki went and stepped out of the timeline. What if all that confusion wasn't a product of corporate restructuring and instead was the product of a couple of variant Lokis creating multiple parallel realities? It's an elegant in-world solution to an inelegant out-world problem, and a pair of Lokis are just the ones to do the job. But how does a Lady Loki end up helping Spider-Man and Doctor Strange? Well, there are a few paths that they can take that are hinted at by both the series and the comic books. In the MCU so far, even though Loki has been the most persistent foe, we haven't had a lot of time for many heart-to-hearts to get to the center of who Loki really is. There have been some moments with his brother where we've seen that their relationship is more complicated than sibling rivalry, and that they've both had a complicated relationship with their father that has done more to drive them apart than any real differences they might have. But when Loki meets someone who has studied not only this Loki, but all Lokis, Loki has had some time to discuss his worldview in a more complicated way than just, I should be in charge. By Loki's estimation, no one is truly evil, nor are they truly good. This goes back to Loki being, essentially, about Loki. And to achieve those ends, Loki plays the role of villain. But as we've seen him develop over the course of the Thor movies, Loki's interests can align with the good guys as easily as they can with the bad guys. The Timekeeper's sacred timeline has Loki as an evil lying scourge, as Ravonna tells Mobius. But Loki is more complicated than that. Loki, lady or otherwise, isn't going to sit well with an overlord, and the TVA isn't likely as benign a bureaucracy as it thinks it is. Deposing Kang's influence on the TVA, even if we don't see the Kang that will eventually get in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, would be a perfect example of the complex nature of Loki. When Loki went lady in the comics, it was an effort to gain the trust of the people of Earth. Of course, Loki was playing a long game as usual because, as we said, Loki can be trusted to be on Loki's side. It just so happens that in this case, Loki's interests and the interests of Doctor Strange and Spider-Man happen to align. Doctor Strange happens to be in charge of protecting his reality. Whether or not he knows that there's a Kang the Conqueror dinking around with time remains to be seen, but it's clear that Lady Loki isn't cool with it. With a broken timeline, she might also end up helping Peter out of his identity crisis. Remember how J. Jonah Jameson just outed his identity? Yeah, well now, via the multiverse, Lady Loki's actions could actually help Peter. Will he be thrilled about this? Probably not. The bigger pull for Spider-Man is always his sense of responsibility, and if this multiverse fracture leads to a bunch of his foes coming together via converging realities, maybe even say 6 of them, a sinister amount to be sure, then this could affect him immensely.